I'm delighted he's joining us. Bruce Carter is the former head of Black Men for Bernie. That has a nice ring to it. Black Men for Bernie. BMB. And now he's founder of Trump for Urban Communities. I saw him interviewed recently. I thought, this is a really interesting story. And Bruce Carter joins us now. Bruce, how are you? Good to talk to you, man.
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. There's a lot of news to get to. By the way, Pence was asked at this big meeting, this big press conference on Capitol Hill, when you have all these Republicans out there, finally, they seem to be uniting finally behind Trump Pence. And then the first question was, well, what about David Duke? David, I never hear David Duke ever discussed. No one thinks he's relevant in any conversation except now it's, well, doesn't Trump really like David Duke? And doesn't he says nice things about Trump? So doesn't that call your whole campaign into a deplorable question? But tell us about your own personal journey. Black Men for Bernie. Now you're working for Trump as in this group, Trump for Urban Communities. Tell us about your move on the spectrum.
Well, I'm not a political pundit, but my 17-year-old daughter asked me during the Texas primaries who I voted for. I didn't vote. I was really just dissatisfied with the last 8 years that had taken place because I'd seen people go backwards, especially in the communities that I serve in. And my daughter said, well, had I voted, I would have voted for Bernie Sanders. And as a father, if you ever have a moment with your daughter that's 17, a teenager spending time with you, I really felt bad that as a black father, not being involved in something that is critical in our life, which is politics, because it governs our lives whether we want it to or not. And that night, after she basically educated me about the history of Bernie Sanders, his fight for equality, and showed me where he was chained to a black lady, I was like, you know what? Black men have to do more. We got to get involved. It was Black Men for Bernie. This is on a Wednesday night. I do marketing. So on Friday morning, I did some research, saw there was a CNN debate, but he was down 17 points in Michigan. So I was like, we're going to go to Michigan. We're going to talk to people. We're going to talk about what Bernie's done. Didn't know any of the things that I know now about Hillary Clinton as the Secretary of State, as the senator. All I did was worked on the fact that this man understood that we had some inequalities in America and was able to go to places where people don't go. We went to the barbershops, the car washes, the Popeye's chicken, the communities, and people responded. Bernie ended up winning Michigan.
Right.
He said it was miraculous.
Right.
And so MSN said, hey, it was Black Man for Bernie. And I'm like, okay, there's something to this. We're missing, and we can make a difference. And it just propelled from one moment to the next. We ventured through, in 90 days, 40 states. And, you know, it impacted my life forever because I couldn't go back to the couch. And then when I seen how corrupt the Democrat Party was, we were part of the WikiLeaks, and it just woke me up to the point that says, you know what, we have been tricked for so long because all we knew was Democrats in the South. And it's my responsibility, other black men across the country, to at least empower, inform voters. And then we started doing research because I like to be informed. I've seen the poverty levels in the districts that had been Democrat for decades and decades and decades, and it wasn't going to change. I started seeing all the Democrat congressional leaders had been convicted for taking care of themselves. And it was just an awakening that I said, what we need to do is get out and form some relationships, talk to some Republican candidates. And I was so happy to see Paul Ryan today, because if you go to Trump for Urban Communities, we highlight him in a video years ago, not an election year, where he was talking about how you fix communities. And it's the people in the community that's already serving, not the ones with the titles, the people who don't have budgets, but their heart is right for the people. And that's what we've been hoping for, is to bring that unity where people that have it, people that have power, and who are willing to partner with the people in the community.
Well, let's now go from you crisscrossing the country, talking to people, finding that Bernie Sanders might have tapped into something with this economic disparity, especially for these minority communities. Hasn't really moved. We have rich people have done really well in this so-called recovery, but middle class and poor people seem stuck. They have really gotten a pay increase. These trade deals, all this stuff has been a disaster for the middle class. So then Bernie obviously finally drops out. And when do you then say, aha, Donald Trump, he's the guy? How do you go from Bernie to Trump? I mean, Bernie and Trump do agree on some issues for different reasons, like trade and the Wall Street problem. And they do agree on that, which is, I think, that's interesting. But they are still very different people. Bernie believes in a big government response. Trump believes you have to empower the people, get the government off businesses back to grow this economy, to lift people out of poverty and, shut down the borders. Bernie's for open borders, bring more people in. Trump's like, no. Don't flood the country with more indigent people. That hurts black, minority, and low-income workers.
I agree with that. My goal was to do whatever I could to restore families. And after research, I'm 100% confident that Donald Trump knows business. He knows real estate development, and these are some of the issues that are plaguing these urban communities. So once we were able to make that commitment, and I can say as early as March, we had Republicans across the country, individuals that started reaching out saying, if Bernie doesn't make it, would you consider Trump? And I've had people I've never met that are Republican conservatives, alt-right, as people call them, Tea Party, that says, hey, man, I think that you and Donald Trump have some similar thought processes about how you make life better for people. And the more and more I became confident, the easier it was to validate why I do what I do. Because once I have it in me, I can get people to see it.
So let's talk now about what's possible in the African American community. We have heard Democrats disparage, and even some Republicans disparage what Trump's tried to do at the beginning with his minority outreach, the visit to Detroit, his speech out in Oregon. They criticized him for only talking to white audiences. They said it appears that it's really just trying to reassure white voters, not really to help black voters. Would you say he should keep doing what he's doing regardless of the critics?
Well, you have to outreach, but the outreach has to be with the people. You cannot reach people through TV commercials, not in the urban communities. You cannot reach them from a pulpit. Somehow you have to be visible, so there's an interaction.
That's what I always say.
And it's the information that you give. Now, I'm not going to say, hey, Donald, run down to the poorest part of Philadelphia.
And walk through and see what happens.
Yeah, that's not going to happen. Mm-hmm. But once the groundwork has been done, you create platforms where people can get to know you.
You're right.
And then they're more comfortable with you.
Yep.
So when people feel like they're just being asked to vote, it's pandering. But when you go to them with a plan saying, look, I don't know your community. I've never been poor. I don't know what it's like. But what I will do, I'll get the people that have been here who have put the work in, and I'll make sure that they have the tools and the resources. That's my commitment to making it better. And if you hold me accountable, I'll hold you accountable. And you can't take the black Republican who has not been in the community, who wears a suit and tie every day, and think that he can walk in and persuade them. It doesn't work that way. You can't take the black pastor who people never go into the church, and the church is bigger than the community, has more money, has the jets, but they're poor people. You have to get people who've endured that process to be able to say, you know what? Here's what's happened over the last 20 years. When we voted Democrat, nothing happened good. I think what we do is we at least attempt something different, hold them accountable, and we make everybody better. Because you can best rest for sure, the Democrats, when they lose, I said when they lose, over the next 4 years, they're going to be saying, you know what, if we ever get an opportunity, we have to earn it back. So you got to get on the ground.
Yeah, so he has to engage. Right, he has to engage.
Yeah, that's it.
Interesting insights. Bruce, you're right about that. The way that you begin making inroads is to have it be ongoing, person to person interaction. That means the people running the job banks, people running the soup kitchens, people working with unwed mothers, be there. And it doesn't have to be addressing 1,000 people. It could be addressing 10 people in a really important community center, on a boys club in a part of the city that is, especially difficult for young people. There's a way to continue this that is not stilted or occasional or forced. It's a normal part of the ongoing conversation and the ongoing outreach and the listening tour that he started in Detroit. We'll take a break on the Laura Ingraham Show, 855-40-LAURA. Mike Pence is flanked by Republican leaders today on Capitol Hill, but maybe it wasn't as effusive coming from the House leadership as we would have hoped, although Pence is certainly very effusive about Paul Ryan. Is Paul Ryan still half in, half out? That's what's being texted to me now after folks watched the entire interaction. Symbolically, it looked good, but substantively, there wasn't all that much there, perhaps. We'll take a break. Don't go away.
The Laura Ingraham Show.
It's the Laura Ingraham Show on Talk 1370.